There is a quiet moment that rarely gets named. It happens after the lights dim, after the body settles, after the act that was supposed to deliver relief is already over. The room is silent, but something inside you stays alert, not aroused, not dissatisfied in an obvious way, just untouched. If you know that moment, this conversation is for you. What most men are taught to call intimacy is framed culturally as conquest, performance, or release. Win the moment. Do it well. Finish strong. Yet when men speak honestly, late at night, anonymously, in comment sections and private confessions, they describe the same paradox. The body got what it wanted, but the man feels emptier right after. Not because something went wrong, but because something essential never arrived. A useful image here is symbolic rather than sexual. Intimacy is like a locked room. Men are handed keys that reliably open pleasure, but not the door to meaning. The mechanism works. The door opens halfway. Sensation enters. But the room itself, the place where you feel recognized, grounded, and whole, remains closed. Over time, you stop questioning the room and blame yourself for not enjoying the keys more. Underneath this sits an unspoken fear that rarely reaches language. If I reveal what I actually want here, I lose power. Power becomes the currency of safety. Desire is edited. Needs are disguised. The performance stays intact, but something more vulnerable is kept hidden, not because it's weak, but because it feels dangerous to expose. This creates a shadow tension inside many men. On the surface, there is a persona, sexual competence, confidence, control. Underneath, there is the self, the part that wants safety, recognition, and permission to rest without being evaluated. These two parts are not enemies, but when they are forced to live separately, intimacy becomes a stage instead of a meeting place. The stakes of this split are quiet but cumulative. Repeating intimacy without fulfillment doesn't just disappoint. It slowly erodes purpose, polarity, and self-respect. The body learns to reach for more intensity, while the nervous system never learns how to settle. Over time, desire starts to feel compulsive rather than meaningful, and connection feels oddly lonely. Midway through, we expose the pattern men miss most that flips this entire script. There is a hidden wound beneath much of modern desire, and it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks functional, adaptive, even successful. Many men learn very early to use arousal as a way to regulate something more painful underneath. The sensitivity to rejection, the quiet fear of being unwanted, the memory of reaching and not being met. Excitement becomes anesthesia. Intensity becomes a way to stay ahead of disappointment. From the body's perspective, this makes sense. Arousal is fast. It floods the system with energy, narrows attention, and pulls you out of self-reflection. In moments of novelty or sexual intensity, the mind goes quiet, not because peace has arrived, but because the nervous system is temporarily hijacked by stimulation. For a while, the ache goes offline. Neuroscience helps clarify why this relief never lasts. Dopamine is the chemical of pursuit. It spikes with novelty, anticipation, and escalation. It's what keeps the chase alive. Oxytocin, by contrast, is the chemistry of bonding and regulation. It doesn't excite the system, it settles it. It signals safety, continuity, and emotional coherence. One stimulates, the other stabilizes. Confusing these two is not a moral failure, it is a cultural inheritance. Here is the counterintuitive twist most men discover only through repetition. The more intensely a man chases arousal, the less satisfied he feels afterward. Not because the experience failed, but because the nervous system never reached the state it was actually seeking. Dopamine burns hot and fast. When it drops, the body is left exactly where it started, except now there is fatigue layered on top of unmet need. Many men sense this without language. It shows up as restlessness after intimacy, the reflex to reach for the phone, the urge to scroll, distract, or mentally move on. Sometimes there is a subtle emotional drop that feels disproportionate to the moment itself. These are not signs of ingratitude or dysfunction. They are signals, predictive markers that attachment needs were activated but not resolved. This is where a quiet reframe begins to emerge. If arousal isn't the goal, the question changes. The question is no longer, how do I want more intensity? It becomes, what is my body actually asking for beneath the excitement? Often, The answer has nothing to do with sex as an act, and everything to do with regulation, recognition, and permission to be unguarded. In Jungian language, this is the difference between living from the persona and listening to the deeper self. The persona knows how to perform desire. It knows the script. The self speaks through sensation, timing, and aftermath. It speaks softly, often after the moment has passed, and it doesn't shout. It waits to be noticed. When men slow down enough to notice this distinction, something unsettling but clarifying appears. Much of what has been labeled desire is actually a strategy, a way to outrun vulnerability, a way to stay in motion so nothing deeper has to surface. This is not a flaw. It is a survival pattern that once made sense, and yet, patterns that protect us early in life often limit us later. The nervous system keeps asking the same question until it is answered differently, not with more effort, but with more accuracy. Don't skip. The next topic reframes control in intimacy in a way most men initially resist. At a certain point, many men discover that desire alone doesn't feel safe. Intensity can be unpredictable. Emotions can leak. Attachment can form without permission. And so, something subtle enters the room alongside attraction, control. Not always obvious, not always domineering, but present in the way the moment is managed, scripted, or emotionally contained. Control often masquerades as confidence. It looks like knowing exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to stay composed while doing it. But beneath this steadiness is usually a quieter motive, the need to prevent exposure. When a man controls the frame, he reduces the risk of being seen where he feels unfinished, uncertain, or dependent. From a Jungian perspective, this is what happens when the persona begins to inflate. The persona is not false, it is functional. It is the mask that helps us operate in the world. Problems arise when the mask becomes the only place we are allowed to exist. In intimacy, this shows up when sexual roles replace authentic presence. The role performs, the body executes. But the self, the part capable of mutual vulnerability, never fully enters the room. Philosophically, this mirrors an old tension. Machiavelli understood that control preserves power. It protects states, systems, and outcomes. But intimacy is not a state to be governed. It is a process that unfolds through mutual risk. What protects power often corrodes connection. What secures dominance quietly dissolves trust. Culture reinforces this confusion. Films often portray the confident man as unshakable, until control slips. When it does, the collapse is dramatic. Rage, withdrawal, overperformance. These scenes resonate because they reflect an internal truth many men recognize but rarely articulate. When control is threatened, the nervous system interprets it as danger, not disappointment. The trigger is simple and deeply embodied. Loss of control activates shame. Shame narrows the field of awareness and pushes the system toward two familiar exits: shutdown or escalation. Either the man disappears emotionally, or he doubles down on performance. Neither response is about desire itself. Both are about protection. This is where compassion matters. Control did not originate in intimacy. It was learned earlier, often in environments where unpredictability made openness costly. Control became a way to stay intact, to remain respectable, to avoid humiliation. It worked, until intimacy asked for something different. Control protects against shame, but shame didn't originate here. It arrived long before desire had a name. At the center of many patterns that look like confidence, there is a wound that rarely announces itself directly. It doesn't say, "I am wounded." It says, "I've got this." It presents as capability, attentiveness, emotional intelligence, even charm. But underneath, there is often a history of early inconsistency, care that arrived sometimes and disappeared other times, without explanation. For many men, love was not unsafe, but it was unpredictable. Attention had to be earned. Emotional attunement required performance. Being easy, relaxed, or simply present did not guarantee connection. Over time, the nervous system adapted. Hypervigilance replaced trust. Desire became linked not just to attraction, but to alertness. Chemistry felt strongest where uncertainty lived. Jung used the term anima to describe the inner feminine image a man carries. formed largely through early relationships. When this image is shaped by inconsistency, desire tends to move toward completion rather than connection. The body is not looking for intimacy. It is seeking resolution, not union, but relief. This is why some of the strongest chemistry men report mirrors the emotional unpredictability of childhood. The pull feels magnetic, but the aftermath feels destabilizing. You can see this pattern in men who later recognize that their most intense attractions echoed familiar chaos. They describe a realization that lands slowly and painfully. What felt like passion was often hypervigilance dressed up as romance. The nervous system was activated, not soothed. Desire was fueled by the hope that this time, the story would end differently. Here, a quiet reframe becomes possible. Desire is not, at its core, a hunger for approval. It is a longing for relief from constant monitoring, from scanning the emotional weather, from managing the connection so it doesn't disappear. When intimacy reactivates the nervous system instead of calming it, excitement is mistaken for aliveness. Safety rarely announces itself with fireworks. It often feels subtle at first, almost unfamiliar, and this is where many men become confused. If desire has always been paired with tension, calm can register as absence rather than presence. The body hasn't learned yet that regulation can coexist with attraction. If intimacy reactivates the nervous system, safety, not excitement, is the missing variable. 2 topics ahead, we test this against a real-world rupture that changed how men define masculinity. When safety enters intimacy, it doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself as passion or excitement. It arrives as permission. Permission for the body to soften without losing dignity. Permission for attention to widen instead of narrow. Permission to stay present without scanning for the next shift in tone or mood. This is where a hidden conflict surfaces for many men. There is a longing for softness, emotional ease, mutual warmth, unguarded presence, but also a fear that softness might erode masculine integrity. That to relax is to relinquish strength. This belief is rarely conscious. It lives in posture, breath, timing. The body braces before the mind can object. From a physiological perspective, safety changes everything. When the nervous system detects consistency and attunement, oxytocin increases and the vagus nerve engages. Breathing deepens. Muscles release their readiness. Attention becomes less strategic and more receptive. This is not weakness, it is regulation. Depth becomes possible only when the system no longer needs to defend itself. Here is the counterintuitive truth that unsettles many men at first. Men often open faster when they don't have to lead emotionally, when they are not responsible for maintaining the tone, the pace, or the outcome, when presence is enough. In these moments, masculinity doesn't disappear. It reorganizes. Strength expresses itself as steadiness rather than control. There are subtle signs when this shift occurs. Breathing slows without effort. Humor returns naturally, without edge. Eye contact stabilizes instead of darting or hardening. The body feels more spacious, less compressed. These signals are easy to miss because they don't announce themselves as achievement. They feel ordinary. That ordinariness is the point. One quiet observation becomes available here. During closeness, some bodies expand, while others brace. Expansion feels like room to breathe, to stay, to receive. Bracing feels like readiness, vigilance, or containment. Neither is wrong. Both are information. The body is always honest, even when the mind is conflicted. As safety deepens, another fear often emerges. Softer, but more existential. What if I relax fully and I'm still not chosen? What if I stop performing and discover that my presence alone isn't enough? This question doesn't come from immaturity. It comes from history, from moments when being oneself did not secure connection. This is where intimacy stops being about technique or chemistry and becomes about courage of a quieter kind. Not the courage to pursue, but the courage to remain. To let the system settle without rushing to earn reassurance. To allow closeness to be simple and see what survives there. This safety exposes a deeper fear. What if I'm still not chosen? There is a sensitivity many men carry that never learned how to speak openly. It lives beneath composure, beneath humor, beneath competence. It is the quiet anticipation of being left, dismissed, or replaced once the full self becomes visible. This sensitivity doesn't always feel like fear. Often, it feels like strategy. When rejection is anticipated, distance is created in advance. Sometimes that distance looks like emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it looks like overgiving, overfunctioning, or becoming indispensable. Both are attempts to manage the same underlying uncertainty. If I am fully here, something will be taken away. Desire in this context becomes scripted. Intimacy follows predictable grooves designed to reduce risk rather than deepen connection. Over time, this creates a belief loop that reinforces itself. Presence feels dangerous, so partial presence is offered. Partial presence limits intimacy, which then confirms the belief that closeness doesn't last. The pattern repeats, not because the man lacks insight, but because the nervous system prioritizes protection over truth. Philosophically, Nietzsche wrote about masks not as deception, but as survival. What protects us also imprisons us. The mask becomes so functional that removing it feels like exposure rather than relief. In intimacy, this shows up when men confuse emotional neutrality with strength or detachment with sovereignty. The mask keeps pain out, but it also keeps nourishment from getting in. Many men describe a moment of disorientation after leaving high-intensity, unstable connections. When intimacy no longer carries adrenaline, it can feel unfamiliar rather than boring. The absence of chaos registers as emptiness at first. The body hasn't recalibrated yet. It mistakes regulation for lack of desire, because excitement was once the signal for aliveness. Here, masculinity quietly redefines itself, not as dominance or invulnerability, but as the capacity to remain present without armor, to tolerate closeness without rehearsing escape, to allow desire to reconnect with purpose instead of approval. This shift doesn't erase sensitivity, it integrates it. Sensitivity becomes information rather than command. When desire is no longer organized around preventing rejection, it begins to orient toward meaning, toward alignment, toward what actually restores rather than merely distracts. The script loosens, space appears, and in that space, something steadier has room to form.